Vive la République! Vive la France!
France has chosen a new president, the country's youngest ever. Emmanuel Macron was elected just a year after launching his own political movement. He's defeated the far right and the mainstream parties. So, will we see a new France? And what does this victory mean for Europe? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Rochelle Carey. Emmanuel Macron's landslide win over the far-right's Marine Le Pen has been hailed a victory of hope and optimism over fear and reaction, a vote for globalisation, not nationalism, and a rebuke of the political establishment. At 39 years old, Macron will be France's youngest president and the first leader in modern French history who doesn't belong to a major political party. His victory was decisive. He took 66.1% of the vote, compared with 33.9% for Le Pen. But that was the National Front's best ever showing, exposing deep divisions in the country. During his campaign, Macron promised to remake a political system that he says has failed and vacuous, and with the plan to energize the economy and reform the European Union. His victory is seen as remarkable for someone who only formed his political movement 13 months ago, and without any MPs in France's legislative assembly. But he now has to win seats in next month's parliamentary elections. And Le Pen will seize on her greatest performance to secure further inroads for the far right into France's political mainstream.
Merci à vous.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for having fought with courage for so many months. Because yes, tonight you have won. France has won. What we have done over so many months has no precedent, no equivalent. Everyone told us it was impossible, but they didn't know France.
Emmanuel Macron is pledging to serve with humility, devotion, and determination. But what does he want to achieve? He campaigned on a passionately pro-European platform, calling for more investment to bolster the Eurozone rather than through austerity measures. The former investment banker and economy minister is promising tax cuts for corporations and homeowners. He wants to slash 120,000 jobs from the civil service and reduce government spending. And he promised to prioritize asylum seeker requests within 6 months, saying refugees are welcome. His rival, Marine Le Pen, had called for tougher immigration quotas. Let's now bring in our guests. Joining us in Paris, Renaud Girard, Chief Foreign Correspondent for Le Figaro newspaper. In London, Rainbow Murray, Associate Professor of French Politics at Queen Mary University of London. And in St. Gallen, Switzerland, Christophe Fry, Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of St. Gallen. And welcome to all of you for this discussion. So, Emmanuel Macron, a non-establishment candidate. We'll discuss later whether he's actually an anti-establishment candidate, but at the very least, he's a non-establishment candidate, and he is now the president of France. Were the voters voting for change? Was this necessarily a change election as you see it, Rainbow?
I think it would be a bit of an overstatement to say he's a change candidate or a non-establishment candidate, bearing in mind that he was a minister in the outgoing government and also worked as an aide to the outgoing president, François Hollande. So his opponents have tried to portray him actually as Hollande Mark II. What does single him out from other politicians is that he's never previously been elected to political office of any kind, which is very unusual in France for someone standing for president, never mind getting elected. And the political party that he leads was only established a year ago. So he's not come from nowhere, but he's certainly a relative newcomer to the scene.
Christophe, do you agree with that analysis?
I do. I don't quite see the no or anti-establishment with Emmanuel Macron. As far as I can see, and when I look at his socialization in general, he's as establishment as it gets in a Sciences Po inspection des finances. So I see continuation in many things, or in other than words and rhetoric. I see continuation.
So what were voters wanting then? Were they just tired of their existing parties and wanted a little bit of change, but not a lot of change? How would you characterize then what voters may have been thinking that so resoundingly voted for him, Christophe?
I think, first of all, what voters want was to prevent Marine Le Pen. We have been there quite a few years back with Jacques Chirac and Jean-Marie Le Pen. We're basically at the same spot, Republican mainstream on the one hand and Front National on the other. So it's, en France, on vote toujours contre, as the French say. You know, you try to prevent the worst, and that's what they have been doing pretty well. Under the circumstances, they have prevented Marine Le Pen with a wonderful result.
Renaud, would you characterize this election as more wonderful? Wonderful. Would you characterize this election as more anti-Marine Le Pen or pro-Emmanuel Macron?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the vote of adhesion, the people that really wanted Emmanuel Macron as their president, is very simple to compute. You multiply his score in the first round by the abstention vote and you have 20%. But it doesn't mean that from now he will not have some kind of dynamics that can, and he can win more support. What is very important in this election is that the two parties that have ruled France for more than 40 years have been fired from the political scene. They did not appear in the most important election, in the second round of the presidential election. So the message of the electorate is very clear. You mismanage the country, you are out. So now, of course, there's a lot of expectations for Emmanuel Macron. He has like three huge challenges. First challenge is to reunite the country. The country is very divided. Second is to reform the country. And number three also is to give, with Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, it will be his first international meeting, to give a new breath to European Union after the huge disaster that was Brexit.
It's a pretty that's a pretty spot-on outline you just gave us, and we are actually going to reference that throughout this discussion. Rainbow, to Renaud's point, Emmanuel Macron could not have done this had the existing political system not had a lot of cracks in it. Will there have to be some sort of reckoning for the existing parties?
Absolutely. They have to do a bit of soul searching and try and figure out what went wrong. You can place the blame on their selection of unsuitable candidates. The Socialists chose a candidate who was too far to the left. The Republicans chose a candidate who was not only rather to the right, but also, as it turned out, mired in corruption scandals. But it's more than that. Both parties are suffering from significant internal division between their centrists flanks and their more left or right-leaning flanks. Lots of divisions over personalities. The left has had 5 years of being in government, which has seriously tarnished its reputation. Its presidential candidate was someone who'd been constantly rebelling against his own government for the past 5 years. The right were likewise full of internal division, which is why they were unable to replace François Fillon after it emerged that he was damaged goods. And both parties have had unsuccessful spells in office, which have left the electorate disillusioned with them. But they now have the challenge of just 6 short weeks to try and persuade the country to give them another chance and vote for them again, while Emmanuel Macron has the parallel challenge of trying to persuade everybody to give his political party a chance, because without that, he's not going to have a governing majority, and that's going to make it very difficult for him to implement the reforms that France so badly needs.
Christophe, let's look ahead to these elections that Rainbow brought up. The Socialist Party, of course, Hollande's party, they hold 258 seats right now, and the center-right 185. How this party, Emmanuel Macron's party, did not exist a year ago, did not exist. How does he make inroads in Parliament to even begin to address his agenda?
I think it will not be that hard for him to make those inroads, given that what is left of the established parties as we used to know them is really just empty shells. So I think that in a quite natural kind of movement, many seats will be won quite handily by Emmanuel Macron, because centre-right and centre-left, and even more so on centre-left, there will be, people will just change from one to the other. That's why in terms of substance, I see continuity rather than change. But yes, the formal shells do change.
Renaud, do you agree with that?
The Constitution in its Article 20 says that the government, not the president, the government leads the policy of the nation. So the Prime Minister needs to have the support of the National Assembly. I mean, France is still a kind of parliamentary democracy like Britain, of course with an important president, but still a parliamentary democracy. So these elections will be very important. It's likely that there's a dynamic and that Emmanuel Macron could have even a majority by himself. If he doesn't have a majority, if Les Républicains, you know, the centre and right party, which did not manage to get selected for the second round by only 1.5%, it's true that this party could also have a very important parliamentary group, so you will have discussions and you will have, maybe you will need some kind of unity government like you had, for instance, in Germany.
So, Rainbow, what should Macron be looking for in a prime minister?
He's looking for somebody who ticks a number of boxes. First of all, he wants somebody who will be loyal to him, but at the same time, he also wants someone who can bring in voters and potentially members of parliament from outside his own party. So the loyalty card would best be ticked by someone from within his own movement, En Marche, but he might consider reaching out and appointing someone, for example, from Les Républicains, in order to undermine the authority of the Republicans by making them part of his movement rather than their own autonomous unit. And that would also perhaps entice some of their electorate over towards his party. He's suggested that he might go for a woman prime minister, which I would definitely like to see, because with one very brief exception, France has had no women prime ministers and has never had a woman president. And that would be in keeping with his general intention to offer an element of political renewal to French politics.
Christophe, do you think it's an overstatement to say that there are two Frances? In a lot of presidential campaigns over the past decade or so, candidates will often say there are two Americas. This country is very, very divided. Does France fit that description as well, or is that too much of an overstatement to you?
Well, it depends on the criterion. Yes, of course, you can argue that at this time France is divided into, as Marine Le Pen did say last night, les mondialistes on the one hand and les patriotes on the other hand. It may be simplistic, but then again, yes, there is something to it. But, you know, when I try to, let's say, grasp the implication, what needs to be done or what needs to get done, it always boils down to one thing. The new president and his government, they will need to deliver. If they do not deliver anytime soon, polarization or division or whatever name you will have for the thing will just, you know, will be more enhanced, will be more conspicuous. So what we need now over the next few months and years really is we need a government that will deliver, you know, economics, but also in terms of public discourse. I hope and I trust that this president will have the guts to go on, you know, being pro-market and not just at the first best opportunity fall back into old technocratic parlance.
So, Rainbow, it sounds like what Christophe is saying is the campaigning is one thing, the governing and execution is another. Do French voters have a reason to be optimistic about the agenda that he laid out and he could actually make these things happen?
It's a little bit hard to say at this stage because he's a bit of an unknown quantity. He has certainly been walking the walk. Only time can tell if he's, he's been talking the talk. Only time will tell if he's also going to walk the walk. I wanted to come back to your question about whether there are two Frances. I would say that it would be wonderful if there were only two Frances. It's more like five. The split between the far left, the centre right and the far right, which is what we saw in the first round of the presidential election. I mean, there were four candidates within the margin of error and a fifth who represented the mainstream left that was the outgoing government. That's completely unprecedented. And on the one hand, that places a huge challenge at Macron's doorstep because he has to unite all of those differing factions. On the other hand, it's a potential advantage in the sense that there isn't a unity against him. So even if he can't quite manage a parliamentary majority, he's not going to have a majority of MPs united against him. The deputies that aren't in his party will be divided across the political spectrum and are unlikely to work with each other against him. So he might be able to get his policies across even if he's working as a minority government and has to reach out to different actors at different times.
Okay, Renaud, let's talk for a minute now. Let's pivot to Europe. Jean-Claude Juncker, European Commission chief, tweeted this. He was happy that the French chose a European future. Donald Tusk with the European Council also very happy about this, says French people, he thanked them for choosing liberty, equality and fraternity over the tyranny of fake news. So with Emmanuel Macron, the leader of France, what does this say about the future of Europe? And then we'll get to Brexit in a moment, or perhaps that's going to be part of your analysis, but he's clearly very, very pro-EU.
Yes, he's very pro-EU and he will try to reform it. He will try to do it more successful. Europe, especially the southern countries in Europe, have a problem of unemployment. So there is a need for investments, and he will try to convince Angela Merkel that more investments with German guarantee for the debt should be devoted to infrastructure and research and education programs in Europe, because he thinks, and is right, that the Eurozone is a political building. It's a political union before being a political, economical union. In the United States of America, of course, a poor state like Missouri is helped by a rich state like the New York State. So the same should apply to Europe. So he will ask more effort to Germany, but at the same time, he will have to promise Germany that he will do the reforms that Germany did. It's called the arts laws from 2003 to 2005, that he will do it. He has pledged to do it by executive orders, what we call in French ordonnances, but he will have to convince Merkel that for once France will keep its word.
Christophe, the National Front, Marine Le Pen's party, over the last few decades, they do better every election. And yes, she lost by a lot, but you could say that a far-right party actually had a pretty good showing. How do you see them adapting and adjusting to try to capitalize off of the fact that they did get millions of votes?
Well, absolutely, and that's why it is hard for me to understand why so many people would cheer at this time. Of course, it's nice that Marine Le Pen didn't really get elected, but then again, look at the timeline, look at what they are today. So again, the farther along we get without results, unemployment, reform, labor market reform, labor law, at some point, something needs to get done. And unfortunately, it's not even so much Marine Le Pen herself that will decide upon the fate of the Front National and how they will do. It's actually, what the Fifth Republic as such will manage to get delivered. They need to deliver. The Republican mainstream needs to deliver. And so the challenges are formidable. And I can only wish this president not only the charisma, the talent, the sophistication that obviously he brings along, but I hope that we'll have the sheer stamina to push these reforms, because as soon as he will get things moving, Marine Le Pen will not stand a chance.
Rainbow, do you agree with that? Because it certainly seems like the National Front's not going anywhere.
I would agree with that. They've come along leaps and bounds in terms of their popularity. In 2002, when Jean-Marie Le Pen qualified for the second round of the presidential election, it was referred to as an earthquake. It was seen as shocking and unprecedented. There were huge street protests against his qualification, and people from across the political spectrum rallied to vote for Jacques Chirac, who was the unpopular outgoing president, but got re-elected with a margin. He got a score of 82%. When we compare that to Marine Le Pen, she doubled her father's score. No one was surprised to see her qualify to the second round, and she didn't mobilise the same degree of protest and antipathy. And yet, despite that, some people in her party see the score that she did get as disappointing because it was lower than what the polls were predicting. And she put in a very poor performance in the debate televised for the French nation on Wednesday evening, which saw a decline in her score relative to what it had been previously. So she didn't even do as well as she was expected to do, which shows just how far her party has come. She's now trying to rebrand the party. She's talking about giving it a new name, which is one step further along her path of separating from the legacy of her father and trying to hit the mainstream. So I think she's far from finished, and it remains to be seen how much further she can take the party. During that debate, she was trying very hard to establish herself as the candidate of opposition. She wasn't really pitching to win, because I think she knew she couldn't, but she was trying to stake her claim as the legitimate opposition to a Macron presidency.
Renaud, I'm going to let you have the last answer. The voter turnout in France this time around was something that a lot of countries would actually be envious of. But for France, it was a low turnout in the 70s. Why?
Yes, of course, you had a lot of abstentions, and because usually for presidential election for a second round you have an 80% turnout. So if you count the blank vote within the abstention, the turnout looks like 65%. And you have to understand that a lot of François Fillon was the candidate for the center and the right, and a lot of Fillon voters and a lot of Mélenchon voters was a candidate for the far left, did not want to vote for Macron. Of course, the left doesn't want to vote for Macron because they say that he's a banker, that he represents the international capitalist system, that he is not prepared to protect the workers, that is wonder boy of globalisation, and he's not the one that will protect French population. And the right wing, some of the right wing did not vote for him, though François Fillon appealed to vote for Macron. They didn't vote for him because they think that is the former minister of François Hollande, of the last president, and is responsible of the very bad state of the French economy and the French society.
All right. That will have to be the final word. Thank you to all of our guests, Renaud Girard, Rainbow Murray, and Christophe Fry. And thank you as well for watching. You can see the program again anytime if you visit our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Rochelle Carey, and the entire team, bye for now.